Hey guys! So this part of the series is going to be about calling the quarters. And I actually encountered someone who was not familiar with that term. The quarters refers to the directions as associated with each element. Together, the four of them make the four quarters of the circle. Or, if you prefer the visualization of the square with the circle contained within it, you can do it that way too. But each cardinal direction has properties associated with it that correspond to an element. North is earth, east is air, south is fire, and west is water. That does vary from tradition to tradition, but that's typically what you're going to encounter. In each ritual, you call the quarters as a form of protection, as a form of balancing the energies of the circle. Each step thus far has been a means of balancing the energies of the circle. You have purified the space and consecrated it by casting the circle, because by banishing the negative energy through purification, you have created a vacuum, and nature doesn't like vacuums, so you consecrate it, bringing in holy energy by casting the circle, which also contains the energy within the circle, and in some cases acts as a protection, as a form of protection, as a barrier to keep out other energies, but mainly it acts as a means of getting your space, your physical space, closer to the gods by opening up that portal to them, by putting you between the worlds. Just in case you aren't as familiar with this practice as you might be at the point of doing a dedication, if you're watching this simply as a means of learning and you're not writing a dedication ritual, like I know a lot of you are just watching it for education purposes. So, you're calling the quarters. There are a few different ways to do this, and you're going to figure that out as you start researching it. A lot of the different ways I wouldn't recommend. I would recommend, when you're starting out, to just call the energy of that quarter. Just call the energies of the powers of fire, air, water, earth, whatever. Because the watchtowers and the guardians of the watchtowers, which you're going to see invoked a lot in these callings, aren't something you're going to want to work with right away, because a lot of people don't understand what they actually are, and you're not going to want to really mess with that if you don't know what you're doing. So, for example, the guardians are just that. They are not going to be really involved in your ritual, per se. Their energy is going to be projected out most of the time, protecting you while you're in your ritual. At least that's what I found. So it's not something that you're going to want to call if you want to actually interact with those energies. The guardians of the watchtowers and the watchtowers themselves are not specifically related to the elemental energies anyway. So that's something completely different that you're going to want to explore later in your studies. But if you're just starting out, simply call the energies of the element that you're working with at that time. You don't always have to call all four either. You can just call one and work with that energy through your circle if you're doing like a water ritual or something. So that's something to keep in mind too. For the purposes of a dedication ritual, you could do any of these. You could call the energies to balance out the energy in your circle, the energies of those elements, or you could call the watchtowers of the guardians as a means, if you've had experience working with them usually, as a means of introducing your new self within Wicca to them, because you're going to be working with them later, and it's kind of a nice thing to do, a nice gesture to introduce yourself using your new magical name, because most of the time in dedication rituals you'll take your new magical name, so that every time if you get a new magical name, it's important to do a rededication to mark that point in your life that you've transitioned into a new part of yourself, a new way of thinking, a new person. So you need to rededicate yourself if you get a new magical name. You also need to rededicate yourself if you find a different patron god or goddess, or something else major like that changes. Other than that, one dedication's fine. You might want to go back every year or so and like reenact it a little bit, kind of like renewing your vows or something. It's just a nice thing to do. It's not required. I don't do it. Occasionally, if I think about it, I will, but I mean, it's not horribly important. It's just a nice gesture sometimes. You can look online for quarter calls and things like that and find inspiration to write your own, because most of the ones you're going to find, like I said, are going to be with the watchtowers or the guardians of the watchtowers, so they're not going to be ones you're going to want to use word for word most of the time. So you can get inspiration to write your own through that. You can do some meditations with the elements to get a feel of their energies and how you work with them, and do it that way. A note, all the stuff we've done prior to this point is pretty much what an article I just read on Witchbox calls plug and play. When you write your circle casting, your quarter calls, your blessings, your purifications, all of that, you're done. Unless it's tailored to that ritual that you're writing it for, you're done. You can use it for any ritual after this. So after you write your first ritual, if you really liked how it went, you can reuse everything that you used previous to this point. You could even use the next step, which is the god and goddess calls, if you use the same god and goddess, or if you use the generic lord and lady. You can reuse those as much as you want. So really, when you're writing a ritual after your first, you're only writing the rite itself, what is contained within the opening and closing. And you can even reuse parts of that, like communion and the great rite and things like that, that you have put in that ritual too, that are also plug and play. So really, you're only writing like a Sabbath celebration, a dedication ritual, a dedication rite, any sort of spell work you're doing. So it's not going to take as long every time. I'm not saying that you need to dedicate months of your life every time you need to write a ritual. I'm saying that it's going to take weeks, but not months like this first one might. So, and that might be exaggerating it a bit. I'm not sure. It depends on how much you can really focus and sit down and get done in one sitting, and how much you actually need to go back and experiment to see what works for you, or how much you've already done of that. So that also depends on your personal experiences. So that's probably gonna help you guys relax a little bit hearing that, because I know some of you are probably sitting there like, this is a lot of work to do every time I have to do a ritual. And it is a lot of work, but it's not this much. So that's something to consider. I mean, you don't have to go back and use everything that you've used. You can start from scratch, or you can use certain elements from the first ritual that you wrote and reuse them over and over if you really liked the way they worked. Again, you might want to try that over through the course of 3 times and see if they really did work, or if you might want to change them a bit. Also, if you do a different ritual, like say for your dedication ritual, you wrote pretty generic quarter calls, you can go back and say you're doing a ritual for healing or something. You can add a line or so to each quarter call and specifically ask for the properties of that element to assist you in your healing. Like fires with passion. You can use aid me this night with your passionate energies to... I don't know, that was horrible, but that's an example. So you could do that with every element, and that's kind of a nice touch, and it helps enhance the theme and the feel of your rituals, get you into that mindset even further. So other than that, you don't really have to rewrite it every time. And that's kind of really the extent of what I wanted to cover on quarter calls. I'll see you guys later.